The call came at 7:15 on a Wednesday evening, and I almost didn't answer it. I was northbound on the 400, both hands on the wheel, sleet pecking at my windshield in that miserable way it does in November when the weather can't make up its mind. I'd spent the afternoon in Newmarket helping my neighbor sort through her late husband's papers. The kind of favor you don't refuse when you've been widowed yourself and you know what it costs to ask. My hip was complaining. The CBC was on low. The last thing I wanted was more conversation. The number wasn't one I knew. Something made me pick up anyway. Some old instinct that I have stopped trying to explain. "Is this Evangeline?" A man's voice. Young, careful. "Ma'am, my name's Davis. I'm a conservation officer at Oro Medante. We found a woman in our south parking lot. She had your number on a card in her coat pocket. The card says Jocelyn." My daughter's name. I was already signaling for the shoulder before I understood what I was doing. The conservation area was 40 minutes east of where I was, down roads I half remembered from when my daughter was small, and we used to drive out this way on Sunday afternoons. I don't know how fast I drove. I don't remember the turns. I remember the sleet and the officer's flashlight moving toward my car as I pulled in, and then, beyond him, a silver emergency blanket wrapped around a figure sitting on a bench near the washroom building. I didn't recognize her at first. That is the thing I still can't get past. My own daughter, and for half a second I didn't know her. Her face was swollen along one side. Her lip was split. She was holding her left arm across her body at an angle that told me, 32 years as a school librarian, notwithstanding, everything I needed to know about fractures. She trained as a tax accountant. She wore her hair pulled back, and her coats always cost more than anything in my closet. Tonight the coat was torn at the shoulder, and there was dried blood near her temple, matted into her hair. "Mom," her voice was barely there. I got so cold. I knelt down in front of her on that wet pavement. I took her face in both hands. I looked at her, really looked, and I said, "I'm here. I'm right here." The officer had already called an ambulance. He gave me space. He asked if I knew who might have done this. I told him honestly, not yet. My daughter told him she didn't know either. She said it so quietly and so evenly that I understood she was protecting something. She would tell me later, not him. In the ambulance, I held her good hand and watched her try to stay awake. She kept almost drifting and then pulling herself back with a small sound like someone catching themselves at the edge of a step. "It was her," she said, not looking at me, looking at the ceiling of the ambulance, his mother. I said nothing. She drove me out there herself. Said she wanted to show me a piece of land the family was looking at. Said they were thinking of putting up a new build near the conservation area boundary. My daughter paused, swallowed. When we got out of the car, she hit me with something from the back seat. I went down. She kept saying I didn't belong in that family, that I came from nothing, that I was going to ruin everything she'd built. My son-in-law's mother, a woman who sat on the board of 3 charitable organizations in the Greater Toronto area. A woman who had been photographed shaking the Premier's hand at a housing charity gala not 8 months ago. Jocelyn, I kept my voice level. Why now? What happened that made her do this now? She closed her eyes because of what I found. My daughter had been working on a consulting contract for 6 months, detailed, forensic, accounting work, the kind that requires going through decades of financial statements with the patience of someone who genuinely loves numbers. She does love numbers. She always has, since she was a child laying out her allowance in neat little rows on the kitchen table. 3 weeks ago, her husband's family asked her to review documentation for their charitable foundation, the Keene Family Housing Trust, a nonprofit that raised millions annually to fund affordable housing construction across southern Ontario. My son-in-law sat on its board. His mother was the executive director. It was, on its surface, a respectable and well-regarded organization. My daughter found the rot in the 3rd box of files. construction contracts awarded to numbered companies: 1847293 Ontario Limited, 2904551 Ontario Limited, for project management, site supervision, professional services. Millions of dollars over 7 years, no staff directories, no verifiable physical offices. When she cross-referenced the contractor registration numbers with the CSANSDDATE, with the CRA business database, she found that most had been incorporated within 6 months of receiving their first contracts from the trust, and several shared the same registered address, a mail forwarding service in Mississauga. She confronted his mother. She told me she had thought, even then, even after everything she'd found, that there might be an explanation. Some legitimate tax structuring arrangement she wasn't aware of. She wanted to give the benefit of the doubt. She is generous that way. It is one of the things about her I have always loved and occasionally feared. His mother had smiled at her and suggested they take a drive. She said she would explain everything. Said it was complicated and she didn't want to discuss it in the house. A short sound escaped my daughter that wasn't quite a laugh. I believed her. I got in the car. I thought about what it costs, over years, to be made to feel that you're the one who doesn't understand things. Mom, her grip tightened on my hand. There's something else. Tell me. I'm pregnant. She looked at me then, really looked. 14 weeks. We hadn't told anyone yet. I sat with that, 14 weeks. His mother had driven a 14-week pregnant woman out to a conservation area in November sleet and struck her hard enough to fracture her arm and split her lip. And then she had gotten back into her Lexus and driven away. I felt something settle in me that evening in the ambulance. Something cold and clear and very old. Something my own mother would have recognized immediately. I made a decision at the hospital, and it was not a comfortable one. My daughter had evidence. She'd photographed dozens of pages of documents on her phone before his mother had suggested the drive. She had names, dates, amounts. What she did not have was protection. The Keene family had construction contracts across Simcoe County and charitable relationships that touched every level of local government. My son-in-law's father had donated a wing to the very hospital where we were sitting. If I make a formal statement tonight, my daughter said, she'll know by morning. And I don't trust that my husband will protect me. She said it without drama, which was, somehow, harder than tears would have been. I thought about my brother. Frederick retired from the OPP 14 years ago after 30 years of service, most of it in financial crimes. He runs his own investigation firm now out of Sudbury, just he and 2 former colleagues who trust each other. The way people only trust each other after decades of difficult work. He is the most methodical person I have ever known. He taught me to drive on a gravel road outside of Timmins when I was 16 years old. He sat with me through the worst 3 months after my husband died without once telling me what to feel or when to be done feeling it. I stepped out into the corridor and called him. He answered on the second ring. Freddie, I said, I need you. I'm already looking at the map, he said. Which hospital? My brother arrived just before 6 the next morning. He came through the door of my daughter's room, looking exactly as he always looks. Unhurried, wide awake, carrying a thermos of coffee and the canvas bag that I have learned over 58 years of being his sister can contain almost anything useful. He hugged me. He sat down beside my daughter. He let her talk for a long time without interrupting. When she finished, he poured coffee for the 3 of us and said, I'll need copies of everything on that phone. And I want to look at the Keene Family Housing Trust's charitable filings. Those go back through the CRA's Public Charity Register. All of them are public record, my daughter said. That's right. He smiled the way he does. Most people are surprised how much is public record when you know where to look. He worked for the next 2 days. He made calls I wasn't privy to. He drove out to addresses and took photographs. He sat for long hours in the corner of my daughter's hospital room, with his laptop screen angled away from the window, and he came back each evening with something more. What he found was not surprising, once you understood who you were dealing with. It was simply larger than we'd imagined. The numbered companies that had received contracts from the housing trust were not random. They were connected through corporate filings to a holding company registered in New Brunswick, a company whose sole director was listed under a woman's maiden name. Over 7 years, approximately $4 million had moved from the Keene Family Housing Trust through those contractors and into that holding company. From there, it had dispersed 2 condominium units in Fort Lauderdale, a property in Portugal, a brokerage account belonging to no one else. My son-in-law's father, as far as my brother could determine, had no knowledge of the New Brunswick company or the foreign assets. She wasn't only stealing from donors, my brother said, on the second evening. She was hiding it from her own husband, building herself a private exit. I thought about the kind of woman who constructs a secret escape route while her husband believes they are building something together. "Can we reach him?" I asked, the father. My brother looked at me steadily. "What do you want the outcome to be?" I looked at my daughter. She had her hand on her stomach, the way she did now, almost without thinking. "I want to be safe," she said quietly. "I want my baby to be safe. I want a fair divorce, and I want to be able to rebuild my life without looking over my shoulder." That was enough. My brother made contact through a mutual connection. A retired judge who knew both men at a distance through professional circles. He didn't explain the nature of the meeting. He said only that there was a matter of some urgency involving the family and that it required a private conversation. My son-in-law's father agreed to meet within 6 hours of receiving that message. We chose a restaurant in Collingwood, public enough to be safe, far enough from the city that there was little risk of running into anyone connected to the family. My brother went in first. I came in separately a few minutes later and sat at the adjacent table. I had copies of everything in a plain envelope in my bag. He was a large man in his mid-70s, the kind of face that had been handsome once and was now simply definitive. He had the stillness of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. He sat down across from my brother, ordered nothing, and waited. My brother laid out the documents one at a time, methodically. That is the only way he knows how to do anything. He did not speak while he read. Only his face did not change him away. A slight tremor in the fingers as he turned each page, which he did slowly, as though giving himself time to absorb something he had already half understood. When he finished, he set the last page down. "How much?" he said. "Approximately $4 million over 7 years. There may be additional assets we haven't yet identified. And the assault on my daughter-in-law." "Yes." A long silence. "What do you want?" he said, not hostile, precise. I moved to the table then, sat down beside my brother. He looked at me, recognized something in my face without being able to name it. "I want my daughter to have a safe and fair separation agreement," I said. "I want a guarantee that your wife never approaches her or her child, and I want to know that my daughter can rebuild her life without being pressured, followed, or threatened in any form." I held his gaze. "In exchange, we have not yet spoken to the CRA, the Ontario Securities Commission, or any journalist. Yet." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "There is something else you should know. Something I discovered when I began looking into this myself." My brother and I waited. "The reason my wife was so frightened of what your daughter found." He was choosing his words with care now. Not to deceive, I could tell the difference. He was choosing them, because what he was about to say cost him something real. My son knew, not the full extent of it, but enough. He had known for some time that his mother had been using trust funds for personal purposes. He covered for her in at least 2 board meetings when questions were raised. He thought that if it stayed quiet, It didn't have to become his problem. He stopped, looked at his own hands. Your daughter didn't stumble onto this by accident. She was getting too close. My son told his mother that his wife had begun asking questions about the contractors the week before she was hurt. The table was very still. He didn't tell his mother to harm her, he continued, but he told her, and he did not warn Jocelyn. There is a particular kind of pain comes from understanding that someone allowed a danger to move toward your child while they stood by and said nothing. I don't have the right word for it in English. My grandmother would have had one. Then the terms stand, I said, and they apply to both of them. He nodded once. They do. He kept his word. Within a week, a family law solicitor contacted my daughter's lawyer with a separation agreement, comprehensive, unconditional, structured to give her complete financial independence. The no-contact provisions covered both his mother and my son-in-law. His mother did not go to prison. I will not pretend that sits easily with me. What happened instead was that his father retained an independent forensic accountant, confirmed the full scope of the misappropriation, and reported the trust's irregularities to the CRA himself. Framed as a voluntary disclosure, the financial penalties were significant. The reputational consequences were complete. She resigned from every board she held within a month. Her name was removed from the gala programs and the charity walls and the committee letterheads, and she moved away from the city, and eventually what remained of her public life simply went quiet. My son-in-law went to Vancouver. He did not contest anything. My daughter and I found a small house in Penetanguishene on the bay, where the winters are long and honest, and the water in spring looks like hammered silver. My brother found the place, drove up on a Saturday in February with his camera, and came back with photographs and a landlord's number. He negotiated the lease himself. That is the kind of brother he is. My daughter recovered slowly. The fracture healed before the rest of her did. Some nights she still woke at 3 a.m. with her heart pounding, and I would hear her moving around the kitchen, filling the kettle, and I would get up and sit with her until the sky started to change. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just sat. That was enough. In April, she felt the baby kick for the first time while we were sitting at the kitchen table going through seed catalogs for the garden. She grabbed my hand and pressed it against her side, and we both went very still. Strong, I said. She laughed, actually laughed, the first real one in months. The kind that takes over your face before you've decided to let it. Her father-in-law called once, in May. He asked how she was, carefully. He asked, with an old man's hesitant dignity, whether he might be permitted to send a gift when the baby arrived, and whether there might one day be a possibility of some small contact. My daughter thought about it for 3 days. Then she said yes, one visit, at a time of her choosing, with no expectation of the test. He accepted without argument. My brother drove down from Sudbury the week before her due date and didn't leave. He slept on the fold-out in the spare room and complained about the mattress and ate everything in the refrigerator and drove us to the hospital at 2 a.m. when the time came, navigating the empty highway in the particular focused silence of a man who is very afraid and will not show it. My granddaughter was born on a Thursday in June. My daughter named her Celeste, which was my grandmother's name, a woman who had come to this country with almost nothing and a set of ambitions that no one in her village thought were reasonable, and who had proceeded, quietly and stubbornly, and with complete faith in her own judgment, to prove every one of them wrong. Celeste, a name that had been waiting for someone worthy of it. When the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, and I looked at that small, serious, ancient-looking face, I thought about what his mother had said to my daughter. About coming from nothing, about not belonging, about blood that wasn't worth anything. I looked at this child who carried her great-grandmother's name, and her grandmother's dark eyes, and her mother's stubborn jaw, and I thought, "You had no idea what you were talking about." We come from exactly somewhere. We come from everywhere that matters. My brother was in the corridor. I could hear him on the phone to his wife, trying to sound casual, saying, "She's small, she's just—" "I don't know, Lena. She's very small and everything is fine," in the voice of a man who has not cried in 30 years and is working very hard at maintaining that record. My daughter was watching me hold her daughter, and there was something in her face that I recognized. Not happiness exactly, or not only that. Something quieter. The look of a person who has come through something and found herself still standing, and is only now beginning to understand that standing was possible all along. "We're going to be all right," she said, not a question. "Yes," I told her, "we are." I said it the way my grandmother would have said it. Not as comfort, not as wish, but as a plain statement of fact about who we are and where we come from and what we do not surrender. Celeste stirred in my arms, made one small sound of protest at the indignity of being new to the world, and then settled. Outside the window, it was the kind of June day that makes you remember why you stay in this country through everything it puts you through. That particular shade of sky that only happens when it is finally, genuinely warm. The trees full and certain of themselves, the whole ordinary, irreplaceable world going on, without any awareness of what had just happened inside these walls. We couldn't stop it or hold it still. But we had it right then, and we had each other, and we had this child with her great-grandmother's name and her whole life ahead of her. That was more than enough to begin.